record. Because if I forget to do that, we won't be able to do it once we start. And so we are live in our Facebook group, Women Thriving Unapologetically. So ladies, I am incredibly honored. So you'll realize why once we get into this conversation with Amie Heeter. And we're going to talk about the power of pressing pause and the art and essence of practice. Is something that I absolutely love to talk about. So and I know you guys are going to get such value from that. And so if you have any questions as we're going through, just post them in the comment feed. And at the end of the show, we'll take a look at those comments and be able to answer them. It's one of the benefits of being in the Facebook group is you get to ask questions of our guest and get them answered on the spot. Because I'm quite honestly just too scared to take callers right at this point.
I can appreciate that.
My very first show, you can imagine how nervous I was going live on radio for the very first time. And the sound engineer didn't know that I wasn't going to take callers. And there's a caller coming in. And this is Women Thriving Unapologetically. And the first caller was a man. And he's like, "Do you want to take it?" Because at that time I was getting a lot of stuff on my, Facebook trolling kind of stuff. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so.
All right, 15 seconds. And we'll
Okay,
get started.
great.
Welcome to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Over the next hour, you will hear raw, honest, and inspiring conversation between Lynsie and her guests, discussing how to thrive, live joyfully, and abundantly in spite of life's challenges. Now, here is your host, Lynsie McKeown.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Women Thriving Unapologetically. I'm your host, Lynsie McKeown, and I'm so delighted to be having a conversation on a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, and it's the power of pressing pause and the art and essence of practice. And we have a very special guest today, but before I introduce this amazing woman, we're going to do what we always do at the beginning of every show is we're going to stop, pause, and breathe. So I think this is just perfect timing for the show. So let's go ahead and just take a moment to stop whatever you're doing. Just pull away from the busyness of your life just for this moment so that we can pause, and perhaps closing your eyes if it's safe for you to do so. And if you like, you can even place your hands upon your body, one on your heart, one on your belly. And just connect to your breath in this moment. First, just feeling the gentle flow of breath through the nostrils as you breathe in and breathe out. And then softly begin to expand that breath so that you can feel the breath expanding the space of your heart and the space of your belly. Just this gentle rise with the inhale and this gentle fall back inward with the exhale. And just seeing this breath that you take into your body and you release from your body as sacred, giving you this opportunity to pull away from the distractions and come back to a place that is perhaps in this moment quieter, more steady and more peaceful. And just knowing that through the breath that we can come back to these pauses, these moments of stillness and steadiness at any point in our day. And you are welcome to continue to stay here and breathe nice and deep and full through the duration of this episode, through this call, this connection. And then we're just going to simply bring our attention back, continuing to breathe if you like, but bringing your attention back so that we can invite this incredible guest, Amie Heeter, onto our show. So today we're going to be talking about pausing as a regular practice and how it can look like many different things in the context of our life. It can be through the breath, just like what we did now. It can be through movement. It can be through creativity. It can be through stillness. And what happens is when we cultivate the experience of presence, we can start to see inside and return to a sense of innate connection and possibility within our lives. And so I met Amie about a year ago nearly at the Her Festival in Maine. And she is a nature enthusiast, an adventurer. She's an educator and a lifelong learner, particularly motivated by the intersection of mind body traditions of the East and modern research sourced in neuroplasticity and mindfulness in the West. And I got to experience her beautiful teaching. She was a teacher actually at the Her Festival, and I got to experience her teaching. She's a yoga and meditation teacher and has been teaching since 2003. And she regards the systems of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness as some of the best technologies available to sustain health in the body, cultivate stability and resilience in the mind, and open pathways in every heart. So thank you so much, Amie, for being here today. Welcome, welcome to Women Thriving Unapologetically.
Thank you. It's really wonderful to be here. It's good to see you again and connect with you again, Lynsie.
I know. I'm so hoping that I'll be able to come again to the Her Festival. We're seeing what can possibly happen, what I can manifest here in the next few months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in the Her Festival, if you're in the, well, I guess you don't have to be just in the United States, but if you want to fly all the way into Maine and join some amazing teachers, just surrounding yourself with this intention of stopping and pausing and breathing and connecting with other women, it's a great opportunity. And Amie will be there leading again with 5 other women. 5 other women? Yes, 5. 6 in total. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the power of the pause. I love this topic. So let's just talk with why is pausing so powerful and necessary?
Yeah, pausing as a practice. I think in the simplest terms, what the practice of pausing allows is this opportunity to return again and again to to us and who we are, which seems obvious. We have these bodies, these identities, these personalities, these various roles and responsibilities we play in life that change through time. And yet there's a part of us, and I think we all feel this, there's a part of us that's felt kind of consistent since we've been living, like growing up, since children. And we can lose touch with that sense of self, and that part that's more constant amidst the changes in life. But the practice of pausing for me allowed me to reconnect with that sense of self, that unchanging thread. And it allows me to just live my life from this space, through that connection and that return to the part that's here and is kind of innately whole and wise and, dare I say, joyful. Yeah. And I love sharing the various modalities of practice with people. And I'm really interested today to talk to you because I feel like, yeah, it can look like so many different things. We can have an idea about what practice is supposed to look like. Maybe we don't like the ways we've been shown, but how can we create one that is authentic to us, that puts us back in touch with this sense of return?
And I love that because oftentimes what I hear from my students and my clients is that they just feel they just don't have time, and they have this idea in their heads about what practice, whether it's a yoga practice or a mindfulness practice or a spiritual practice, looks like because of what they've seen on social media or heard from other teachers or read in a book. And they're trying to compare themselves to that and compare their lives to that. And they don't feel like it fits.
Yes. Yeah. I can resonate with that. There's a part of me certainly experienced this a lot in my sort of like coming of age time, where I just didn't feel like I fit in many of the spaces I was in. And yeah, so I also had to figure this out on my own, but also I also very much value when I found sort of these wisdom traditions of yoga, which is sourced in meditation, though we don't always think about that because it is also working with the body and the breath, the sort of holistic self, that I also really learned and drew so much from understanding like the language that was being presented and these pathways, which actually made the experience richer for me and deeper for me. But it started with having to kind of find it out on my own. And I was just kind of wired that way. I can't.
You're wired to find things out on your own. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm kind of
Yeah.
wired that way for better and for worse.
But, I find that beautiful because, I mean, I love that you're sharing that, because too often, in my experience, I would go and be practicing with a teacher. I'm like, okay, that's the way to do it. And that's the way I have to do it. And it would oftentimes not fit my schedule. It wouldn't fit really with what was going on in my life at the time, oftentimes as well. And it wasn't even until just a couple years ago that, you know, there was a shift in our community because we're in the same uh, community of yogis, I'll put it that way, where I felt like suddenly this weight was lifted and I was given permission to actually really honor what was right for me. And it was just kind of mind blowing how I was so tethered to a way of doing things and having to adhere to a certain set of, quote unquote rules if I wanted to achieve a certain thing in my practice. And then I was like, when that lifted, I felt like my practice expanded because all of a sudden I was trusting myself and taking the teachings I had learned and the practices I had learned and being like, okay, what really fits my time, my schedule, my body, my intentions, what wants to come, more importantly, what wants to move through me. And so I don't know if it's for worse. I think it's just always for better that we are.
Yeah, I guess it's, well, I only said for worse because I don't know, maybe some things took me on pretty large tangents that I look back now and I'm like, oh, that's what that was all about. But it was, a bit of a process of learning and finding.
Can you share with us some of the things that weren't working and was the process for you to find the things that did work?
Yeah, I will share something which was a sort of a big moment in my life when I really stepped into the power of the pause. And so, growing up, I definitely also have always been very curious about the world and kind of fascinated by how large it is. The whole of humanity, the history, the cultural textures and diversity. So I came curious and wanting to know more. And, in my upbringing, I was blessed with like a very loving family, a pretty content childhood. And there weren't a lot of resources as far as my mother was a single mom, and she was a career woman, like the first person in her family to go to college and have a career. And she did a lot of things on her own. and I was with my siblings, my brother and sister. And anyway, what I saw was my ticket to sort of satisfy that curiosity and expanse in the world was to get really good grades and to study very hard, because scholarships were like the ticket to get into college, and to particularly like out of state. I was very excited about going. And so I did all the things like you were talking about you're supposed to do, and you know, graduated with honors and got good scholarships, and was like on this path. I thought I knew what I was doing. And we all like, you know, when we enter, you know, for those of us that follow this way, post graduation from high school and into college, it's like so exciting, you know, and full of possibility. And I chose a school, curiously, that it was called Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts, a liberal arts college. It was very different from where I had been studying, which was really rigorous academically, and there were no grades or tests, and everything was done by projects, and that really appealed to me. Because I wanted to also be out of the structure. By the way, that was Catholic school. I like had to go to Catholic school, for better or for worse. And so I got to Hampshire, and you know, it was exciting. It was different. I was on the East Coast for the first time. So different culturally from the Midwest. That was so eye-opening. And also they required that you take a year off. That was like part of the curriculum, is that you take a leave of absence. You could not do it, but it was just part of the structure of the school. Usually people did this once they had a field of concentration, and then they would go, you know, and it would be part of their graduating project, go somewhere and study and create this thing. And I just found that as soon as I was sort of on my own for the first time, I wanted to take the year off right away. Meaning I finished the first year, and then I was like, I'm ready for the leave of absence now. And there were a few of us that were feeling that way, and we kind of leaped together. And it was the first time in my life that I was just able to kind of be out in life on my own terms. And it was exciting. It was like exhilarating, liberating. And but it changed everything for me. I just really wanted to experience life. I guess you could say I felt in some ways growing up, I was like being tracked to a certain lifestyle, a certain level of, you know, part of what maybe you would call the meritocracy. Achieve, 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 and then you'll get results and rewards and, you know, that worth. And I found myself on the outside of that for the first time, and like kind of really curious, but also like, wow, I don't know who I am or what I actually really want. And so in that pause, things really changed, and it ended up me not going back to that place, and just having an entirely different trajectory in my life that I know I would have had if I would have stayed. Not that that would have been bad or worse, but it was the first time that I allowed myself to make choices based on what I really wanted to do, which was actually to be outside of those structures entirely, to see life in a different and with very new eyes, without what I was being told about the world anymore. And that was exciting, but I kind of, you know, that started a process where that wasn't all great. And I don't necessarily, you know, sponsor or like promote that people just make these sharp shifts, you know, there, but I
I mean, I
mean,
find it fascinating because here you are very young and you followed this structure, and you were, you know, doing all the things you're supposed to do. getting good grades, working hard with the intent of going to a college, and you chose this college that, I mean, I wish I had this college, like where you get a break a whole year, and that you take this, and this is that power of that pause. You take that pause, and in that pause, you get clearer, like more insight on, like, wait a second, that's not actually the trajectory I want to be on. And like, it seems like it just reminds me of that pause that we have. And when we create stillness and our daily lives, where we can get some new information coming in, and you realized, oh, I don't want to go back to that. I want to be outside of that structure, and to understand that at such a young age, I think it's just, I mean, I didn't figure that, I didn't come to those realizations until like my mid-30s. So
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so to have it so young and be like, no, I don't want to go back into those structures, I think is just a very powerful and beautiful example of taking a pause and stepping outside of all the doing and all the structures and all the, I always call it the chaos because it feels chaotic to me. And to get clarity, I think is incredible. And what's incredible is I can't believe we're already up to our first break. But when we come back, I'd really like to, I know these things happen all the time when we have a great conversation, but I'd like to talk about, what are some of the practices that we can do? Like, let's get into like, what do we mean by a pause? Like what is, like, we're not taking a year off, but what kind of
Right.
pauses can we take so that we can have some of those insights come in? Because I think we're all seeking something, and we've been conditioned to grasp for things or push for things or strive for things, but how can we use a pause in order to connect to more of that inner wisdom that wants to come through and guide us on a new trajectory, and how we move around some of the discomfort that might come from that. So I hope I remember everything. I'm just now prompting for the second segment.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're
We
going to
can
talk
follow
about that.
that.
Yeah. So don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with Amie Heeter. And if you haven't done so already and you are in the Charlottesville, Virginia area, then definitely go to my Instagram account and go to the bio and sign up for the Women Thriving Unapologetically immersion that is happening on March 4th in celebration of International Women's Day. And so we're going to go into some practices that will help align you and awaken some of your divine feminine capacities. So that's on Instagram, Lynsie McKeown, and we'll be right back after this short break.
All right, perfect. Good job. All clear. Back in
Thank
about two.
you.
Thank you.
That went by fast.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh. I'm like, yeah, we gotta just get practical too. Thanks for,
Yeah.
I didn't even know that I was gonna talk about that, but that came up this morning where I was like, when did this pause business really start for me?
Mm.
Or like
Well,
the big changes, right? Like
yeah.
that pausing brings.
And, I know there's a lot of practical things that we want to bring in, but
Yeah.
when we interweave our stories into it, this just immediately creates a connection with people. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I mean, I've never heard the story, so I was like,
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
and I think storytelling is the most powerful way of teaching and learning too.
I do too. I do too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I thought your story had a lot of good points in it.
Good. Good. Yeah. I'm glad I did that. It was a hard thing to do. And I got a lot of flack, and it was confusing. But one thread I want to pick up on too, as we start to talk about the practicality about what pausing really gives us, that I was about to speak into is really pausing helps us build relationship with the unknown, which is sort of where we have to go if we're welcoming in possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, we can start with that when we come back. How about that? Does that feel like a good place to pick up for you, or is that
I think so. Yeah, I
okay?
think that's a thread that is, yeah, I think important for these times, building
Mm-hmm.
relationship with the unknown
Yeah.
without trying to avoid it all the time.
Yeah.
All right, coming back in
Okay.
about 12 seconds.
Okay.
You are listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Hello and welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. We are here with Amie Heeter today, and we're having a great conversation around the power of pressing pause and why that's really, really essential in our lives, especially in the chaotic busyness of our daily to-do list. So let's go ahead and dive right back in. And before the break, we were just talking about an example of how taking a pause actually changed the trajectory of your life. And I'd really like you to give us a little bit more insight on what does pausing really give us, like all the things.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the very beginning of the show, I talked about it's this really, it can be a wonderful way to kind of return to ourselves as life pulls us in all kinds of directions and into all kinds of thoughts and emotions. We just gonna get to come back to that sense of self, of what's underneath all that stuff, which is a constant sort of reservoir of presence and wholeness. Yet another thing that, as we were talking about this story of the first time I took a big pause, and it became this opportunity to start to discover living in a different way from how I was more motivated by my curiosity and not just living by how I was expected to be. Is pausing is this really special way to build relationship with the unknown. And, I was just mentioning how this big pause that I took from college, which was actually like college said, take the pause. That was part of the college I went to. Nobody had given me that permission yet. It sent me into this time of getting to know myself, but there was a lot of unknown. And also felt scary. And I was disappointing people. Definitely my mom was not excited about that choice. And she was very worried I wasn't going to go back. She'd worked so hard to get me to where I'd been. And anyway, beyond all that, the pausing, and I think this is really relevant to the current time that we're speaking, is it helps us, to just be in relationship with a moment. It can just be a moment that is pulling us into presence and not necessarily needing to know or have things figured out about what's next, but just kind of holding that space of presence, which I find is a real, it's a precursor to stepping into what's possible in your life, is being willing to be with the unknown. And the unknown can be a scary place. And certainly the unknown can be imposed upon us in the way that we don't choose that. We all just went through a massive pause that was imposed upon us through the COVID pandemic. Life paused as we knew it. It's certainly, we didn't ask for that pause. So this is different than the nature of practice in that way, because practice, we're welcoming the pause. That was like a huge imposed pause from life as we knew it. And there was a lot of unknown in that. And of course, there was a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion in that unknown, rightfully so. Yet, I also just want to sort of tie into, in that pause that all of us went through, I think we learned some things, hopefully, about ourselves, about maybe we didn't want to pick up some of the things that were left behind before that pause, some of the momentum we had been in, or maybe the way that we were showing up in life and in our relationships. And so just to reflect on that, what have you not wanted to pick up, and how did that pause change you and change the possibility of what now is your life in what has returned to a more normal flow. It's still with us, we know, but we're not like having to stay at home, and the kids don't have to be at home and not at school and all that. But
And so what I'm hearing from this is that, obviously the pandemic was not a pause that we had invited in, but if we invite the pauses in, like smaller pauses throughout our day, it gives us an invitation to reflect on what we want to pick up and take with us after we take that pause. So right, take a pause, and then you can feel into like, well, do I want to pick that thread of thought back up? Do I want to pick up that, that feeling again after this pause? Is that accurate to say? Would you agree?
yeah, I absolutely agree. And it also builds this capacity to be willing to be in that space of pausing and not knowing, and which can really help us in these times that we're living in, which just are increasingly sort of like, we don't know what's next. There's not the guarantee of like the structures and the steadiness that maybe, Lynsie, as you and I were coming of age and coming into adulthood, there was a different sense of the future than what the youth are living into right now. There's a lot less of knowns and certainties and guarantees. And what do we do with all that? And that's where I'm saying the pausing becomes a real special opportunity to build that capacity of how do we navigate into what's next, with that spaciousness of awareness and presence. Yeah. And then having some choice about how we're showing up through all that, if that makes sense.
I mean, it makes total sense to me because I often teach that the power of the pause gives us choice in that moment, that suddenly we have the choice because it's given us a greater sense of awareness where we are in that moment. And how do you feel like the power of the pause, or the just pausing, relates to the word power?
Connection. Connection is the word that comes, because when we're sort of navigating or living from a perception of disconnection, a perception of just dispersal and distraction, we're sort of not fully there, and we're missing the whole of our lives. And so connection, I think, is the key to why it's powerful, because we not only feel more connected to our own self, to our own breath, like really on the ground stuff, to my own body in relationship with the space and area that I'm in, but it creates this sort of perceptual shift where we feel connected to no matter what we're experiencing, and able to sort of hold that thread of connection, particularly when we're in experiences that are difficult, challenging, disruptive, that we'd kind of prefer to either fight or like run away from, or maybe freeze in. I think it's powerful in that way.
Yeah, it gives a sense of steadiness and strength and resiliency. It's been my experience being able to hold on to that thread of connection. And do we want to elaborate a little bit more on what we're connecting to?
Yeah, this is where this can be kind of personal in how your interpretation is of that. But in the pause, in general, we are connecting to just in a simple sense, when we're talking about, let's say, moments of mindfulness. So mindfulness is a term that we all know very well now. It's like a household term stemming from, Buddhist practices that were more secularized and popularized. But it's this willingness to pay attention in the present moment, like on purpose. And also with a sense of like kindness and non-judgment towards ourselves, but without needing things to be different. And so just really being present to what the experience is. And I do love mindfulness practices, and particularly moments of mindfulness, because they're so brief, yet they're so effective, because it allows us to just kind of return to what's happening and who we are in that moment, and just to be present to it, to really be in our senses, be in our be aware of what feelings are in the space of our awareness. And we can do it without even stopping. Like we can be in motion while we're having that pause. So I think those are really really accessible. Of course, we can create pauses that might help us to feel really connected to that which, if we don't have necessarily a strong sense of self-connection, and to this piece where I'm talking about like this constancy of this underlying sense of self and wholeness, when we don't have that yet, what we're connecting to kind of can be a great through line to discover that. And so if this is what you mean, like connection in nature was my first through line. That is what woke me up to the fullness of my sense of self and my connection with life. Like nature was that first spark and deep connection in that, which is honestly what I found when I took that big pause from stepping away from Hampshire College. Eventually it led me to working in the wilderness, and like everything changed. So what we're connecting to really just, we sort of ask ourselves, like, what makes us sort of have this sense of coming alive in a moment? And this is where, if like stillness practices don't really speak to you, movement like through dance or through even just walking and being in presence, maybe with nature, or wherever that is, whatever helps you feel that sense of connection and of aliveness, like a spark of like, alive. That's like what we want to honor connecting to. And that's where we create a practice of it, to then let these practices show us, the fullness of life and ourselves.
I really appreciate the way that you shared that, because so often we think, oh, if I need to pause or come to stillness, I have to do meditation, or I have to, but you're saying that to do something, to have that deeper connection that you can experience and pausing. The pausing can happen in motion, which is beautiful, but it has to be the motion that's actually has that connection to something that's bringing you alive. It's creating that spark. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to take a pause from work and go on vacation and then, go out and party all the time. That's not, I mean, I don't know. Is that making you come alive? I don't know.
That's where it's entirely individual.
Yeah. But, when you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, how, like you said, dance, and then you think of artists when they're just in that moment and they're deeply connected to something within them that is helping them create this masterpiece of art or writing, or it could just be anything. And it's just beautiful. And I can't say that sitting in meditation makes me come alive in that moment, but what happens is I feel more connected to that through line throughout my day because I meditate. I don't get I don't sit there in the meditation, have the moments, I'm just like, okay, here I am again, just creating this pause where I can just feel things melt away or just soften enough so that the rest of the day I can feel into that undercurrent of connection that's there.
Yeah. I I agree. I do have a ritual of meditation and practices, but I would say like, yeah, practice can be such a rich tapestry. And it was interesting during COVID because I had a very like, I was very proud of the ritual I'd created and was like really into the devotion of it, the discipline of it. But that what happened was everybody came home and lived at home all the time. And even my practice space was no longer could be that. And it kind of threw all of that out the window. For me, I also didn't feel like I wanted to sit and meditate during that time. And so my practice became, I kind of went back to my roots and I just would walk along. I live in the city of Madison, but there's a river. And something I had to do every day was we had a dog. And so we do have a dog, but she was new at the time. And I would walk the dog and, along the river and just, for periods of it, sort of like be really present to the sensations. So like the sounds I was hearing, the feeling of the air, the textures of the water. And that became my practice like, for a while. And it was actually a beautiful reminder and homecoming to what originally sparked me to even want practice in the first place, which was when I started connecting with nature. But also it reminded me that like things can change. And it's only recently that even though I love meditation and I teach a lot of it, that I personally have come back to sort of a ritual of meditation. Things changed for a bit and I learned a lot through that change. And I kind of beat myself up about the change at first. Like, what's wrong with me? Like, I can't be teaching this stuff anymore if I'm not doing it every day and all these things. But then things were too hard to keep beating myself up. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to put that added pressure on me right now because things are bananas. So I learned so much. And that practice grew in and of its own right. But now I'm back to more stillness also at times. And I love it again, it's giving me so much. But it's okay to change.
It's okay to change. Yes, I love that. And I think that's a good place for us to um, take our pause and take a break, short break, and we'll be right back for our last segment. So if you're listening, we're listening to Amie Heeter, and we're talking about the power of the pause. And we're going to come back and hopefully we'll talk a little bit about some of the different practices. We've touched on them, but we haven't actually, listed them for everyone. So maybe there's a few other pause practices we can bring in after the short break. And if you're in the Charlottesville area, as I mentioned on the first break, just go ahead and go over to my Instagram account, to my bio, and sign up for the Women Thriving Unapologetically immersion that's happening on March 4th. We're going to dive into some practices that will help us awaken some of our innate feminine capacities so that we can thrive unapologetically. So after the short break, we'll be right back.
All right, good segment, all clear. Back in just about 2.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
So how are you feeling?
Good.
Yeah, good. I think it's great.
Yeah. Thanks for your questions and prompts. I feel like it's flowing well.
Okay, good. Because I know because I know I threw that question out in the beginning that about, your experience. And sometimes when we throw something out there that you're not ready well, you actually were thinking about it before the show. Maybe that's why I came in. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking like something will come into my head and then you'll say it. So I feel like, oh, this is really interesting. I feel like I'm having a conversation in my head with
Yeah.
don't need to
Yeah.
ask that question because she just answered it. Didn't even have to ask her.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it. And I feel like in this moment, especially after that last segment, like maybe if I had an agenda of what I was bringing in or just certain things I wanted to say, they've been said. So now I'm just like, we'll see what this last 12 minutes brings, which
Okay.
of course I'd love to lead us into just a simple practice.
Oh, yeah. Let me make sure. Let me put it down. I always take little notes to keep me. So we can talk maybe about some of the types of practices,
Mhm.
right, wrong way maybe of practicing.
I think we've already covered that. Like it doesn't,
Right,
well,
wrong.
maybe is there a wrong way to practice? Maybe that is a good question because I've already tried to put forward it can really be our own, but I think there is no wrong, but like, is it bringing us to that sense of spark, that sense of connection to aliveness? That's really
Yeah.
the only thing.
Yeah.
All right, 10 seconds.
Okay.
You are listening to Women Thriving Unapologetically with Lynsie McKeown. Have a question for Lynsie or her guests? Want to share your story? Email Lynsie at thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. That's thrivingunapologetically@gmail.com. Now back to the show. Here again is Lynsie.
Hello and welcome back to Women Thriving Unapologetically. We're talking about the power of pressing pause. And so we've touched a bit on different ways we can pause. Started the show with stopping and pausing and breathing. And we've talked about how you can even take a big pause from life if you want to step away for a little bit. And then also to pause and stillness, the pause that can be created in motions such as dance or connecting to creativity, things that really light you up. And so I'm just wondering what other ways that we can create these moments where we feel really deeply connected. What are any other ways we can pause, especially when we have such busy lives? Like, how can we interweave the pause into our lives so we can stay connected to that through thread?
Well, one thing we haven't touched on, which I think is really worth mentioning, because some of us, might feel more aligned, with spirituality, with a sense of connection to a kind of collective divinity and whatnot. But those practices where we're connecting in with a space of yeah, of devotion, of whatever that is for you, that's that's also really powerful and can be part of it in any at times and not other times, but to feel that, I think all prayer and all, when we look at like spiritual traditions and also religious practices, it's built around these rituals, both group and individually, that are meant to like invite a pause to welcome that presence in as a way of connecting. And so if that speaks to your listeners, and sometimes that can develop over time or not, but that's a powerful way of pausing. I was moved when I was traveling in Morocco, and it was my first time in a Muslim country. And there would be, when we were in the more urban centers, I was part of co-leading a cultural excursion there. There's the call to prayer 5 times a day. And that was new for me. And I really appreciated just that there's these pauses, and there's like loudspeakers and prayers, and everybody stops and has their ritual of being present with that prayer. And I just appreciated that was embedded in the culture. um and I would practice my own version, or even just a moment of mindfulness in that moment, and I loved that. But I wanted to bring that piece in too, because certainly um
Yeah, and just I love the idea of how can we just bring in those moments throughout our day so that it becomes a ritual, whether it's prayer or just stopping to breathe or take that walk where you're connecting to nature and allowing that to um, really bring us back to that connection that can get lost when we just keep pushing ourselves forward. So I appreciate that.
And in my own life, I can just speak what my day looks like. I have a mind that's very prone to distraction. Like that's the beast that
You
is
must be
with
the
me.
only one.
Yeah. We all
Yeah.
know that beast of distraction. And some of us, maybe, I don't know. This is just part of my
I
neurodiversity,
feel
but
like my animal totem is a squirrel.
so I do have a moment in the day where I try to carve out a larger, that could look like anywhere from 10 to ideally 45 minutes. But this is where my background in yoga is, I think, such a rich tradition because it has so many practices that can really meet us where we're at in our life. But I will have one that's more in stillness. So either meditation or yoga nidra is a huge, wonderful stillness practice based in rest and relaxation. I know you had Tracy Stanley on as a guest, and she's just a queen of that topic, that practice. And then also throughout the day, I do have pauses that I've built in, and sometimes I forget to do them, but I try to, they're sort of associated with things that have to happen every day. So I'm still a dog walker most days. And so I build a moment of mindfulness in while I'm walking the dog. And then I've come to just have a moment right before going to bed where I just sort of have this pause, or like as I'm in that transition, I should say, of the day ending and in bed and moving towards sleep. It's just a moment, really, just a moment of like, the day is done. How was this day? How's my heart with this day? And a moment of gratitude that we get to sleep, which I think is a gift from nature, but that I got another day. I did,
That's
even
beautiful.
if it was difficult.
Yeah, we get another day. And so, how about would you lead us through a little practice that we can all pause together? I think it's really
Yeah.
powerful when we practice together and take this pause.
Yes. Yeah. So, uh, as you began, I'll invite us to close the eyes if you're comfortable with that, if it's safe in your preference to do so. Otherwise, you could have your eyes at a soft gaze. And if you're sitting wherever your feet are, or if you're sitting on the floor, maybe it would be your legs that are in connection, but just take a moment and like really feel into your feet, and even pressing your feet to the floor, and then release. Just press and feel that rootedness to the earth, even if you're suspended on a second floor above it like I am, and release. Just one more time, just remember and feel that connection of being on the earth, with the earth. You can release. As you notice the sounds in the space that you're in, which includes my voice, but notice the other sounds. Notice the touch of air on your skin where it's exposed to the air. And also the presence of clothing or what's covering you. Just becoming just more aware of the outer shell of the body. I welcome us to let ourselves feel inside in this moment, what sensations are present in your body right now. Even if we have preference that they might be different, just let yourself feel what is and what's real. breath is a part of that. And now let yourself just feel the breath move in and out. And I also welcome us to, just for three breath cycles, just let yourself breathe more deeply, kind of embody that process. And perhaps, feeling those expanded breaths at the belly or the tips of the nostrils or both. And then inviting a hand anywhere you might like to place it. The heart is always wonderful as that welcoming of a return. The throat is where I'm choosing right now because I'm speaking, just to feel present with that. And just how's your heart in this moment? Is there any emotional coloring present? Just also give yourself permission to feel what's present. We often carry multiple feelings. You could even name any feelings words. And then just welcome yourself exactly as you are in this moment.
So beautiful, Amie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome yourself as you are in this moment. And just know that these practices of pausing are here for us. We can interweave them throughout our day to help us stay more connected to our essential nature. And if you are loving this conversation as much as I am, then definitely reach out to Amie. You can reach her at Amie Heeter. Is it amieheeter.com, correct?
Yep.
And
AMIE. Yeah.
that's right. AMIEHEETER. And you can connect with her also on Instagram, same name, obviously. And then, yeah, definitely reach out to her. She's an amazing teacher and guide. And maybe even come to the Her Festival in Maine, where she'll be there. I might be there as well. And we can all connect and be in sacred circle together.
Woo!
Thank you so much, Amie. I so appreciate you being here. And definitely join us next week, same time. We're going to have another amazing guest as always, and we'll be here at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. And Amie, do you have any one word you want to close out the show with?
Just come alive. Honor your coming
Come,
alive through the pause.
honor your coming alive. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Much love to each and every one of you and many blessings.
Thank you.
All right, nicely done today. Good show. All clear.
Thank you, Matt.
Yep. All right. Well, you both have a great rest of your day.
You as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's stop the recording.